Do you ever feel like the higher you climb in business, the lonelier it gets? Your inner circle of friends, family, and coworkers just don't get it? That's entrepreneurship in a nutshell, but you know that. What if I told you, though, that didn't have to be the case? In today's podcast, we're going to discuss ways to reduce your loneliness and find the right group of people to help you overcome this feeling. Let's jump right in. Welcome to the Brotherhood Beyond Business podcast, where we bring together entrepreneurial men who want more than just financial success. They want deep relationships, business growth, and become well-rounded men. I'm your host, Trev, joined by my co-hosts, Danny and Joe. We're three guys who've built businesses, faced the struggles of entrepreneurship, and realized that the biggest challenge isn't just making money, it's doing it alone. Here's a quick summary of what today's podcast will cover. The world tells men to grind harder, push forward, and that loneliness is just part of success. Brotherhood Beyond Business exists because it doesn't have to be that way. This podcast will cover real struggles, real conversations, and real solutions to balancing business, relationships, health, and personal development. All right, let's go ahead and take a minute to just give a background on who each of us are. Danny, you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, so my name's Danny. I'm here in kind of the Metro Detroit, Michigan area. I own a fitness facility. We specialize in, nutrition, weight loss, and we've been open for about 8 years now. I'm also co-owner in Level Up, a software company, and the BBB Brotherhood Beyond Business group here that we're doing the podcast with here.
All right, Joe, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Joe Rouse. I'm the owner of Breakaway Fitness and Performance in roughly Wilmington, North Carolina, on the coast of North Carolina. We do very similar stuff to Danny, nutrition, weight loss. We help people get stronger, and we have a blast doing it. Been in a lot of mastermind groups over the years, something I've always been interested in. I love the process of coaching, and this Brotherhood Beyond Business podcast and mastermind group is an opportunity that I see to help coach other guys that are a lot like me, that have been through a lot of stuff like me and Danny and Trevor have been through. So really excited to be here today and to start sharing this stuff that we've learned, because us three have been through a lot in business and life.
And I'm your host, Trevor Warnke. I've been through a lot in business. I started as a young entrepreneur in my dad's company and ran a pretty large corporation for years. That kind of made me realize that I didn't want to do that. From there, ended up opening a couple fitness facilities. Actually closed one of them because running two was harder than I realized. Actually happened to all three of us, and where we realized that running multiple locations was harder than that. Still own that gym, but have mainly just a business partner there that does most of it for me. And now I run Level Up. Level Up is a business I own with Danny. And with that, it's a software company that does marketing agency and stuff of that nature. And now the Brotherhood Beyond Business podcast, or Brotherhood Beyond Business in general, is a mastermind group, a men's group designed to make sure that we can help men overcome the obstacles that we ran into. And for us, really, it became the fact that all three of us, we've been masterminds together for getting close to 10 years now. And so what we realized over time is there's a point in our life where we were just grinding like crazy. And then we all of a sudden woke up one day kind of realizing we need more aspects of our life. And it kind of hit me that I think, that a lot of people struggle with that same thing, but also that they probably didn't have to wait 10 years like we did to do that. They could have been working on that the whole time, but hustle culture out there will teach you differently. So that's kind of why we designed the Brotherhood Beyond Business, was to kind of help entrepreneurs understand that you can do it all. You just got to be able to organize your time and do things right. So today, let's go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. Entrepreneurs often feel isolated. Have you guys ever felt that? Like no one around you really gets what you do? Go ahead and kick that off for me, Joe.
Yeah, all the time. I would say I didn't know how lonely I was until I actually got to be a part of a mastermind or a brotherhood type group. And it meant the world to me to just be able to sit here and talk to people like you guys and just have these conversations. And I wish that I would have done it a lot earlier in my career, because you can hash out so many things that you need to. You know what I mean? Like there's days where we talk to each other and it's not just about business. It's like you're my sounding board for that day, just so I can get it all out, because if I go try to talk to one of my clients or one of my, my friends that I grew up with, like it's immediately they're going to glaze over because they're not thinking in the same way that we are, right? Because they're just different. That's why we are the way that we are, because we think differently. Like we literally get excited. We're like, dude, I just noticed that like so and so can't get this done. I got an idea that could fix that. Completely unrelated to the business that we have now, but then we go into like a 2-hour conversation about it. So when you run a business, man, it's you want to include your staff. You want to get their feedback, and you want to have them help move the business forward. But what I've learned is that when you get to a certain point, they can't help you but so much in those conversations. And you have to be able to talk to the right people. And it's got to be people that have experience in similar arenas, or at least with business. It can't just be where they're offering you help because they want to help. It needs to be people that can offer you help that's been tested and tried and true and can actually move you forward. So not very many people can do that. And it's very easy to feel like you're just, I don't know, like, especially when you're struggling. I want to say like stuck on a mountaintop, but when you're struggling, it's more like you're stuck in a valley and you're just there alone and you got nobody to talk to. You can't solve anything. It just gets really, really lonely. And it can be tough, especially for newer business owners.
I think too, Joe, like with that, like I don't think a lot of it's kind of, it reminds me of like parenting, right? Like you read the books, you talk to people that are parents and all that, but like no matter what you look into, read or do, like you're never really prepared for that feeling. You know what I mean? And I'm with you. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
having that sounding board is probably the biggest thing that's been helpful for me. You and me are very similar in this light, right? Like
Yeah.
we use our group as that sounding board because I know for me personally, like same thing, friends, like they just don't understand, unless they're business owners themselves, family, all of that. Like I can't bring some of the stuff to the staff or bring it to the clients because it's going to give them a negative experience, right? They need to see their leader. They need to see us as this positive light, that rock, right? So like if we come in there, we're complaining or we're frustrated or whatever it is, like that's there, very few good things are going to come from that. But for me, like when it comes to like home life too, is how much it can really impact having a sounding board or having a group of guys like this that I can resonate with, that I can communicate with, that I can talk with. Because like if I come home and I start talking to my wife and it's like stressful conversations, like she freaks out. She's like, oh my God, like I can't handle that. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to
Yep.
have this conversation, things like that, right? And then I don't want to put that on her. So I think for me, it's just it helps in so many ways outside of just improving my business, that it's almost like the mindset thing, right? The mental health side of entrepreneurship, of how having a group like this has been, for me, it's been about 8 years now, and where it's it's almost like priceless, right? You can't
Mhm.
explain all of the benefits you get from being a part of a group like this.
Yeah, I'm actually at the point, like you said about your wife, is my wife, whenever I talk about something that's any somewhat stressful, she's like, text the guys. That's what she always tells me. She tells me to text you guys because she's like, that's over my head. That's a little too stressful to kind of like comprehend. Like that's what I have this group for. And she's, we've been together 4 years, and her whole life she's only known me as part of the mastermind group, right, with you guys. And so because of that, she's always had that ability for me to like really rely on you guys. And so I know that you guys were together in relationships before you guys ever joined the group, so it wasn't always that way. But for me, I've always had that benefit, so she's always relied pretty heavily on that. Another aspect that I have that's kind of different is every business that I own, I have multiple business partners in. So because of that, I do have a sounding board. And so it's like, well, for some people are like, why would you need a mastermind if you do have these sounding boards? But I need sounding boards because of my business partners,
Mhm.
because like we have conversations that are tough and uncomfortable, and I have to have other people I can rely on besides that. So in my first business with my dad, I had my dad and my siblings all in it. Like I wish at that point I was in a mastermind, because that was the most stressful time of my entire life,
Mhm.
because family dynamics are hard, and I wish I had a sounding board to like get me through some of it, because I probably in many ways would probably still be in that business if I had a group like this, because they would have let me get over the emotional components of like the release that we get from a mastermind group, specifically with like the daily text that we do a lot. In my fitness business, with that, when it first started, it was like we were 3 27-year-olds that started it. And so that was really stressful because none of us knew what we were doing. And so I joined the Mastermind group not long after starting that business. And that really helped out a lot because I was able to vent about my business partners and the struggles I was going through at that point. And that was really when because I was never lonely, like in the sense of like people would think lonely because I'm the only person. I have had multiple people, but problem is in every business I've ever been in, even though I have multiple people in the business, there's still got to be that one person that's like the CEO in a sense. And that was
Yeah.
always me. And so because of that, I've had to hold that responsibility at all times and it's in certain ways even more stressful to be the CEO of other business partners because they all have the same ownership percentage as I do. And so because of that, you're like, oh man, you guys should be making these decisions too, but somebody still has to be the buck stops here kind of person. And so I think I've relied on you guys a lot in the mastermind to be that like other people are going through this as well. I'm okay. And then that helps me have better conversations with my business partners in the different businesses.
I think
Wonder,
that's important to consider. Like, you're not physically lonely, but you're like isolated in here. And it's a weird feeling that I never understood, or maybe just never verbalized it until someone kind of made it apparent to somebody said it one day. Like, I think it was Nick, one of my former mentors who just said, he said it's lonely at the top. And that was when it's hard to think about that because you're like, especially when you're starting out, because you're like, I'm not at the top. Like, I just started. But you're not, you might have great employees. You might have a wonderful wife and kids, but it's for some reason, there's this background level of anxiety or stress that you just can't express yourself or talk to other people. I could see that being tough with business partners too, because I could see in my head, I'd be getting, well, it's their responsibility to do this or to think this way, but wait a minute, they don't think like me. So they're not understanding this communication, right? Like, I guess we have to learn to communicate with other people, but it's an isolating thing for sure.
and I wonder if this is like why a lot of businesses fail too. You know what I mean? Is because of like this heavy feeling of feeling isolated and not knowing what to do is so impactful for you. Like I was listening to like an Alex Ramosi podcast just like last week, and he was talking about when he had Gym Launch and how they like when COVID hit, like I think I don't remember, it was a vast number of their clients like shut their doors. And he like after talking to them, a lot of them was like they were just kind of like waiting for an excuse to be able to get out. You know what I mean? Almost like
Yeah.
they needed
Yep.
that external like oh well it was COVID, I'm okay. And I wonder if it's because they just had that heavy feeling of just that isolated feeling of like not knowing what to do, where to go, how to handle things, and like that can take a toll. And what are the stats? They say like 95% of businesses fail after the first like 5 years, something like that. It's a crazy number. And I would argue this is probably one of the biggest factors in that.
Yeah. I think you could, and I think people wouldn't understand that unless they've experienced it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just such a game changer to have that sounding board. Like, if I could go back and do it all over again, whether I had multiple locations or only had one location, the first thing I would do is start vetting companies to guide me in the journey that had this aspect that, curated groups for people that are at similar levels that aren't going to pull too much from each other, be able to contribute to each other. And I mean, I can't imagine how much faster we would have all grown had we had that in our lives really early on.
It's also the side where gurus nowadays, and gurus are pretty much like YouTube people anymore, but in terms of they're like entrepreneurship, that's the way to become rich. And all this, it's always like become an entrepreneur. And the longer I've been an entrepreneur, I love being an entrepreneur. I'm wired to be an entrepreneur. I honestly am. But I'm always like, man, you guys don't realize yes, coming up with ideas, that's a simple part. Like creating a new, like something, a new system or whatever, that's the fun. That's where it's easy, honestly. And that's the part
Yeah.
that people get in entrepreneurship. Like, I have this thing, I could just sell them this thing. And it's like, well, that's the easy part. The hard part is obviously marketing is very hard, but the other component is like all the other stuff that you have to figure out on your own. And I don't think enough people talk about that enough. And like, I don't want to discourage anybody from entrepreneurship because it's one of my favorite things in the world. And that's why we do a podcast about entrepreneurship. But at the same time, it's like they're the hard things are like this stuff. And the reason it's lonely is because you can't talk to anybody else about this because nobody else that's not an entrepreneur, that's not the head of the business, is going through the shit you're going through. And so that's why it's been awesome to have a mastermind group of, other business owners doing the exact same thing. And the cool part about for us specifically is we've kind of been on the same path at the same time this whole process. So we are like hitting those same obstacles, which has been really nice. That's not always needed, but it has been really nice for us because we're running in the same roadblocks at the same time. And that allows us to bounce that off of somebody else being like, okay, I know I have this great idea, but talk me out of why this is not the best idea for me to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, think about, like, I feel like we got lucky that we happened to be in a group together because especially as men, like I think often, we talked about like how we got to have each other to talk to. Like we don't love to, we're not naturally going to go get below surface level relationships with people. You know what I mean? Like we're not just going to go meet somebody at church one day or wherever, where else do we go? A coffee shop, outside of business stuff and become friends with them to the point where we deeply trust them enough to tell them things. And it's very easy to wrap all that up into something like drinking every night and develop an unhealthy habit that helps you let go of that stress. Because for me, it's always, I'm proud to provide for my family, right? And protect my family. Like that's what I live for. That's what drives everything that I do. So part of that, and this, whether this is healthy or not, like it's just how I'm going to be and how I'm wired, is like part of that is to shield them from some of those stresses that we feel as we're in business and as we're whatever, right? Like we see the bank account changing, or you're losing revenue in your business and you're, because of a staff member you have that you have to change, whatever it might be. Like part of providing and protecting as a man is shielding the family from that stuff. So I think that kind of increases that level of isolation. It's so easy to be like, man, I'm going to go make an old fashioned on a Tuesday so that I can just shut my brain down for a little while today. Right. And we just get those, it's so easy to get those unhealthy habits going. Or just find ways to distract ourselves. So I think it's beneficial to have something like this too, to help keep from some of those unhealthy habits, like kicking in. Right. Or at least have somebody there to push you, be like, hey dude, you got to stop drinking so much. Like that's not good.
Yeah. It's like, go ahead,
Go ahead,
Trevor.
Danny.
I mean, so, and I think that's where that bonding aspect of it, where it's like a true, real connection with friendship. Like I'm very close with you guys. You know what I mean? Like I literally can talk to you guys about anything and not even think twice of it. There's probably not very many people in my life, even close family, because like what you just said, Joe, like you want to shield them from some of that stuff. Like I can literally open up to you guys about anything, and like that's huge to be able to have that. And I have friends that I've been friends with for a long time, but like I don't even do that with them just because it's not the same. We don't have that bond of like all different avenues of our life, like we do, and I think that's really powerful for that loneliness feeling that a lot of us as entrepreneurs go through and struggle with, in order to come out the other side, or use entrepreneur, the benefits of being an entrepreneur for fulfilling our life. And I think this is that like blend, or that way where you can kind of put it all together and actually get the benefits of being an entrepreneur and have something there to help you with a lot of the negatives that comes with being an entrepreneur. And I think that's, if you're listening and you can really resonate with some of these negatives that we've had, like find some level of support of other people like that have gone through that are feeling the same things you're feeling, because it can be, just tremendous help for you in navigating the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, and the part I was going to kind of bring into that Joe had talked about was I've been in masterminds. We've all been masterminds that are men and women, like co-ed mixed. And there has been something, our mastermind now is just male only. And the reason that's powerful for me personally, specifically, has been I don't have just men's groups in my life. I never have, because you have school and then relationships. The only last time I had that was sports, right? Like high school sports. And I think COVID kind of taught me during that time that I didn't have like a secure group of men that I could talk to. And I do think that is very specific to have conversations. Like, cause Joe got into like, how deep you can have these conversations. And Danny talked about how you can really be like truly transparent with these people. And it comes in with like, I can be more transparent with another male about some struggles that I go through in terms of like, we've had conversations about sex with our spouses. We've had conversations about, like bad habits that we have, things of that nature that you can get deep that I couldn't. I mean, I could probably have them with my wife, and that's probably about the only other person I could have
Mm-hmm.
as another sex have that conversation with. So I do think there's a lot of power as well in having sex specific mastermind groups or groups of like to do that with. For me, it's been very powerful because I'm not naturally, like Joe said, I'm not naturally a person that opens up to other people. I think entrepreneurs in many ways aren't always that way. And so for me, I don't naturally open up. So for me to have a group that I really, really can trust and say things that are uncomfortable, um, like one big issue in my life, I've always struggled with my weight. Even though I've owned gyms and stuff, I always struggled with my weight. But like, I can only really have that weight conversation personally with other men because for me personally, it's like because it's a weakness and I'm a certified nutritionist and all this kind of stuff. I just don't feel confident because I'm supposed to be helping women lose weight because that's what our gym does mainly. And so it's been great to have you guys to bounce that off of a lot of because you're going through the same stresses that I have and you're staying fit. So that's been able for me to bounce that off of you guys. So I do think having the male aspect has been really, really important to me specifically since 2020. When I feel that was the second I realized that I do need, other men in my life.
Trevor, what did you? I think this is worth talking about. How did we get together? Like, what's your story of how like we started to meet, or like how we got into a group? How did, like, you know what I mean? Like, let's start from the beginning, like with how we met each other,
Yeah.
right?
So initially, I was in a business coaching group called Fitness Revolution, which the owner of that, Nick Barry, is still my business coach. And so joined. He had a mastermind group, and what happened is they had just started thinking about joining mastermind people together in a mastermind group. And I was at a meeting, and Nick had just said, like, I think you're an intelligent guy. I think you're kind of ready for something more, and I think you just need a little bit more connection because I was so intensely wired in many ways that he's like, you need other people in your life because you're so wired so much. And so that's how that initially started, was with FR. And then what happened for how I kind of met you guys specifically was me and Joe, we met at our first mastermind group in
Mm-hmm.
Greenville, South Carolina at
Mm-hmm.
Von Bethel's facility, which was an awesome experience to meet you and Marshall and Dwayne and Jeff. I can't remember who all was in that group after that, but like it was an awesome experience to get together. It was the first time my eyes were kind of open to the idea that like the loneliness at the top. I didn't realize I was lonely until I met you guys and realized, oh my God, like I can have these conversations with other people and they understand what I'm talking about. And I'm not like this special little snowflake that has all these things going like, oh, like it's like everybody really deals with this shit. And I just got to understand that I'm not that special in many ways, in a good way. Like I'm not that
Mm-hmm.
special. And so that was kind of the first wake up for me. And then Danny came in a few years later. And Danny was, in my opinion, was me and Joe just 2 years later. Meaning
Mm-hmm.
like he came in with like all this stuff he wanted to do and all this like wanting to like go get it just like we were. And we were still obviously always intense and going forward. But the idea is you could tell that we had kind of had that bond and that relationship where we'd slowed down a little bit to know what was going on. And Danny was coming in as that person. Like he was just super excited for everything, which was awesome. It was good energy, but that's kind of like we knew he instantly would fit because he had the exact same personality as us.
Yeah, Danny, what I remember meeting you at the the big conference that we were at, right? At the Elite Fitness and Performance Summit. Like what led you to come there? Like what was before that got you interested in being in a group? Like what did you find? What piqued your interest? Like when they started pitching the mastermind group to you and stuff like that? Like what was going on in life?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably two factors that led me there, and there's one started with a book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I've read it multiple times, but he talks about it having a mastermind group of people, like-minded people, kind of sorting ideas, helping each other, prioritizing things, and that just really intrigued me, and that led me into like looking at masterminds, trying to understand them. And I was new in starting my business, and the second kind of factor was I try to live my life as best that I can in, the analogy of like slaying your dragon. And I wholeheartedly believe that, like, I think all men should slay a big dragon at some point in their life, right? Have to go through some type of hardship, some type of war, if you will. I mean, that's literally the representation of my new tattoo. Is to, I think, in order for us to truly become a man and truly to, kind of bring everything out that's meant to be brought out as a masculine, like, full man, is to be able to slay your dragon. So I actually try to live every day in that way, where I say I'm going to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and I'm going to try to slay my dragon. So, like, for me, going to a conference was kind of uncomfortable, right? Like, I didn't know anybody, I didn't know anything about it. I loved what they were talking about. I was listening to their content and everything there, and that led me to, looking more into the conference. And so I went. And then when I was at the conference, my slaying the dragon was, being uncomfortable and having conversations with people that I didn't know. So, like, that's what led me to talking to you guys. That's what led me to, like, raising my hand at the conference and volunteering. I think there was like 3 different times that Dave Jack, like, called me out because I was the first one to raise my hand to, like, come up there and do
Mhm.
something or whatever it was. Because I said that's what I was going to go in there and do, not to learn something, not to, like, get something, not to do any of that, but, like, to go in there and just be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's kind of what led me to that. So that led me to having a conversation with Joe. And then that also led me to having a conversation with Trevor. And I think there was one other, it might have been Jim, actually, Jim Harris. And it was like, you guys were all going to lunch. And I kind of, like, not necessarily like invited myself, but, like, kind of, you know what I mean? And that's not something I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
normally do. I was very uncomfortable doing that, but I said I was going to do that. And that led to just really good conversation at lunch and communicating with you guys. And that led to the conversation of, joining the mastermind group.
Right on, man.
Yeah, guys. So I love the conversation we've had today. Let's go ahead and start putting some bows on this today's conversation. Let's go ahead and leave with each person maybe giving one practical tip on how. Obviously, there's our mastermind. You can always join that if you're a male. But what would be some things that they could do locally or with their own inner circle that might be valuable in creating their own version of? Mastermind is sometimes the wrong word. I think it's like their own inner circle.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say you maybe start with, let's say, if you're a business owner and you already collaborate with some other businesses, think about somebody that you gel with really well among those businesses, maybe somebody you talk to more than the other ones, because sometimes collaborating with other businesses is kind of random. And reach out to them, take them out for coffee, go to lunch, do something like that if you can, and see if you can start those conversations and talk to them about just regular meetings to discuss this kind of stuff, like just getting with another business owner that you think is at similar level than you or maybe higher than you, um, and start spending time with them and see what kind of relationship you can foster there. It's terribly uncomfortable, at least for most guys. Like, so maybe have a beer, whatever it is, but find someone. I would start with, like, your connections, and then, I mean, maybe you do like a chamber of commerce or something, but start with your connections, spend some time with somebody, and then try to get that regularly scheduled to develop some kind of relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
like
would.
it, Joe.
What I would say is, specifically when I was in Illinois and we had a gym there, I created like a little inner circle with a lot of the businesses that were very similar to our business, meaning like gyms and chiropractors. It was male specific only because I had just gelled with these guys in different events I'd been to. And I just reached out to them personally and just said, hey guys, would you want to get together once a month and just talk about how we can, grow our businesses in Mundaline? But what it really came to be was like a little men's group that we had it would start off that way. But I obviously had been in a mastermind. So I kind of knew how to kind of lead that group a little bit to be kind of talking about other things. And I'd be like, hey, John, like, how's your daughter doing? We'd start other conversations throughout there instead of just business. It would usually start business almost like a networking group. And the group was only of 4 guys, just 4 of us. But like, it was really powerful for me to have somebody local because I've always had this group that was more like United States wise, right? Everybody in this group was always throughout the US. And that, we text all the time, but you don't get to see them as often. So I created like this little inner group in our local area. And that was honestly really easy to do because once I kind of explained what I wanted to do in the group and talk about, growing our businesses in the local area, but also just, men talking about shit, realistically, that went over really well because the guys were like, oh, I'm all in, because they didn't have anything of that nature either. So I think it's really easy to do as an entrepreneur. The key is you got to be comfortable enough to reach out to people, and they don't have to be your same business. They could be completely opposite businesses, really, because all you're doing is just having conversations about business. And one thing I've learned over having multiple businesses over the years is 80% of business is the same. The 20% is your area, your niche, but 80% of everything else is the same. So you can have great conversations with any business owner. My dad owns a humongous corporation, and I own a little bit, two little businesses in comparison, but I can have the same conversations with him that I can have with anybody else, because marketing is marketing is marketing. Systems is systems is systems. So you can have those conversations with anybody. And I think you can start that in any small group in any town you're in.
Yeah, I think you guys both nailed it. I think, mine definitely would have been similar in terms of, just go where other entrepreneurs are and start having those conversations just to get started with it. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach. Trevor, you kind of started talking about this as well, but like just kind of not being too proud at where you're at, or being a man, being macho, right? Of like accepting that you could be lonely, you could be having hard times, and that is okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think the biggest thing in the first step is, just being aware that you might be going through struggles, you might be feeling kind of that isolated feeling, you might be feeling lonely, and I think that's kind of that first step for being okay with, starting to be able to even have these conversations, right? Because if I didn't admit that, or if I wasn't open to that, I may have never met you guys. You know what I mean? And you guys have been life changing for me. So, I think the first step is just to be aware of it, and not be too proud to accept that this is just part of the entrepreneur journey. And it's not a bad thing if you're feeling isolated or lonely, and it's not that you're less of a man or anything like that. It's just part of the nature of what we do as entrepreneurs. And if you can be okay with that and accept that, yeah, I think that's the first step in getting to a better situation, and feeling more, happy and fulfilled in your entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome, guys. I think that's a great ending point. We look forward to talking to you guys on the next podcast. Great conversation. And it's just the beginning. A favor we like to ask is, if you have a male entrepreneur in your life, please share this video with them. As always, like and subscribe, and follow us on any social at Brotherhood Beyond Business. Success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Build your brotherhood.